In this problem, we're asked to decompose the yield to maturity of a risky corporate bond into three different components: the risk-free rate, the risk premium, and the default premium. Note that the risk premium plus the default premium gives us the yield spread, the difference between the yield to maturity on this risky corporate bond and the yield to maturity of a risk-free bond. So let's begin by calculating the risk-free rate. We're told that there's a 10-year zero coupon treasury bond with a face value of $1,000 selling for $463.19. And so let's begin by drawing a timeline. In year 10, we would get paid, if we owned this risk-free bond, we would get paid $1,000. And what we want to do is we want to find the discount rate that makes the present value of this cash flow equal to the current market price of this risk-free bond. And so we want to solve the equation. $463.19 is equal to 1,000 divided by 1 plus, and this is going to be the risk-free, the 10-year spot interest rate to the 10. And so if we solve this, we find that the 10-year spot interest rate is going to be equal to 8% per year. And so we found that the risk-free rate is equal to 8%. Now the second thing we can do is we can calculate the yield to maturity of our risky corporate bond. So we're told that it's a zero coupon bond with a face value of $1,000. So again, we're promised $1,000 in year 10, but now this is a risky bond, and so there's no guarantee that we are going to earn that $1,000. And so again, we want to find the discount rate that sets the present value of this $1,000 payment equal to the current market price that this risky corporate bond is trading for. And we're told that the price of the bond right now is $321.97. And so again, we go through a similar process like this, and we find that the yield to maturity in this case is going to be equal to $1,000 divided by $321.97 to the 1 over 10 minus 1. And we find that this is equal to 12% per year. And so we see that the yield to maturity of this risky corporate bond is 12%. And so the difference between the yield to maturity of the bond and the risk-free rate gives us our yield spread. And so that's going to be 4% per year. Finally, to decompose this yield spread into the risk premium and the default premium, we have to calculate the expected yield to maturity. And so to calculate the expected yield to maturity, we, instead of using what's promised, we estimate what we expect to get paid in 10 years. So on average, we expect that this bond is going to pay us $762.22. And so to find the expected yield to maturity, we want to find the discount rate that makes the present value of this payment, this expected cash flow, equal to the current market price of the bond. And so the expected yield to maturity is going to be equal to $762.22 divided by the current price of the bond, $321.97, to the 1 over 10 minus 1. And so we find that this is equal to 9% per year. And so this expected yield to maturity is independent of the default risk because we're looking at the expected cash flow, what we assume that we're going to get on average. And so we see that this expected yield to maturity is going to be equal to the risk-free rate plus the risk premium, but it's not going to include the default premium. And so if the expected yield to maturity is 9%, and the risk-free rate is 8%, we see that our risk premium is going to be equal to 1% per year. And finally, once we've calculated the risk premium and we know the yield to maturity is 12%, we find that the default premium is going to be equal to 3% per year.